I have been working with Minecraft commands for a really long time now, and over the years I have run into a whole bunch of very simple but very helpful map making tricks. Each one is kind of too small to deserve its own video, so what I'm going to do today is just showcase a whole bunch of them at once. The first one is a new adaptation of a trick that a lot of you are probably already familiar with. Back in version 1.8, one of the most famously simple things to program was the ability to turn snowballs into fireballs. However, unfortunately, in some of the more recent updates, that trick has been rendered completely useless. Because Mojang changed the way hitboxes work, snowballs are no longer able to interact with fireballs in the same way, and if you try to use that method, it'll just summon a whole bunch of fireballs in midair and make a complete mess of your world, and it won't do what you want it to. After a whole bunch of experimentation, I've figured out a slightly more convoluted way to achieve exactly the same thing, but in 1.16. Before you begin programming with this one, you're going to want to type the following command into your chat bar. All this command does is add a scoreboard objective that tracks whenever a player throws a snowball. If you're running a data pack, you'll want to instead put this in the load function tag. From here, there's really only two commands you need to worry about. The first is the most important, and I'm going to slowly scroll it across the screen so you can fully see what it does. Basically what it does is take the position of the player's eyes and summon a fireball slightly below their field of view and 1.7 blocks forward. Now it only does this when it actually detects that you've thrown a snowball. And by the way, these numbers at the end are just a result of me playing around with different numbers and seeing which ones work best. So 0, -0.5, and 1.7 seem to be the ones that give you the results you want most reliably. The second command is very simple. All it does is take anyone who has thrown a snowball and reset their scoreboard objective. I'm going to go ahead and turn this machine on and show you how it works. I now have a snowball in my inventory, and whenever I throw it, it will throw fireballs instead. Unfortunately, this still is a slight downgrade to the previous method because it's not 100% reliable. If you're moving too fast, sometimes the fireball will just get stuck in midair. And unlike the previous method, this one actually does require two commands, while the previous one only required one. But as of 1.16, as far as I'm aware, this is actually the best way to achieve this effect. The next trick is one that I actually discovered all the way back in 1.8, and I've been using it in tons of minigames and adventure maps ever since then. This is a method of obtaining items that have that enchantment shine, but don't actually have any enchantments on them. If I press this button, the command block will give me a piece of flint, and as you can see, it has the classic enchantment shiny glint thing on it. It's probably easier to see if I go into F5 mode and then like zoom way in on it. Yeah, there. I chose flint because it's actually easiest to see the effect on dark colored items, but you can really do this with just about anything you want. If I go into my inventory, you'll see that it has a colored name, but it doesn't actually display any enchantments. I've never actually seen anyone else use this trick before, and I've actually seen some other people, like YouTubers, try to get this same effect, but put pointless enchantments on their items. I think once I saw someone put power on a block of stone because they wanted to make it look special in a chest or something like that, but with the way I do it, the tooltips don't display any useless information. One other thing is that this trick does work on blocks, so if I give myself a block of stone, it will have the shine all over it. Unfortunately though, when I try to place it down, it doesn't keep the same effect, because unfortunately blocks cannot store NBT data. But overall, I'd say this is actually a pretty useful trick. Okay, so next up we have one that I kind of stumbled across pretty recently actually. What this command block does is detect whatever block I'm standing on and stores it as an item in the last slot of my hotbar. Before I actually explain how the command works, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it on and show you. Right now I'm actually standing on barrier blocks. I don't know if you noticed that, but it doesn't work with barrier blocks and it doesn't work with bedrock, but it does work with most other things. So here in the last slot of my hotbar, I have a lever because I'm standing on top of a lever. If I jump up, it'll detect that I was on top of this sign. I can stand on this chest or that button, and if I go down to the ground, it'll detect the grass block or the tall grass or whatever. I can walk on this beacon and it will just kind of cycle through all these different ore blocks. And of course it will detect the beacon itself. Now right now I'm sure you're wondering why this is even useful, and I'm going to get into that later. It kind of ties back to the next trick, which I will explain why they're connected in a little bit. But for now, I'm just going to show you how this whole command works. Basically what it does is it takes the loot table of the block that you're standing on and inserts that loot into your hotbar. The loot command actually actually lets you choose which tool you're mining the block with. And as it turns out, the tool to use that actually will successfully detect the most different types of blocks is shears enchanted with silk touch. It doesn't necessarily have to be a pickaxe. It will work on things like cobblestone even with the shears. The most important part is that they have silk touch, because that way you can pick up things like grass blocks and other things that you normally wouldn't be able to get in game. There are a few exceptions, like it can't detect grass paths or any other block that is completely unobtainable in survival, but I would estimate that this actually works with like 99% of the blocks in the game. Also, if you like, you can insert the loot anywhere. It doesn't have to be in your hotbar. I just put it in my hotbar because it was easiest to showcase that way. And also, it doesn't have to be what I'm standing on, so you can detect a block anywhere and put it anywhere. In a little bit, I'm going to come back to why this can be so useful, but for now, I'm just going to move on to the next map making trick. What this one does is actually compare two pieces of NBT data together and activates a command if they are equal. To be honest, this is kind of what I wish the execute if data command would do, but all that can do is tell you if a piece of data exists. If you want to actually test two pieces of data against each other, it is kind of lengthy, as you can see. Just bear with me here. To showcase how this method works, I've decided to write a program that takes the first item in this chest and compares it to the first item in this chest. As you probably noticed, this chest has a grass block and this chest has nothing. So when I press the button, it will actually give me a little message that says the data does not match. If I were to take a grass block and put it into the first slot in this chest, pressing the button gives me a message that says the data matches. Now, you don't necessarily have to compare just the first item. If I wanted to, I could compare the entire list of items between these two chests, and then I could put a pattern of stone in here or something. And then if I put the same pattern of stone in the other chest and press the button, it'll tell me the data matches. But if I remove even one piece of stone from one of the chests, it will automatically tell me that it doesn't match. Conversely, I could also get more specific with the data. So say for example, I wanted to only test the number of items in the first slot. Then if I put a full stack of stone in the first chest and a full stack of grass in the second chest, it will still tell me the data matches. But if I take out one of them, or I guess half of them, then it will not match. Okay, so how does this actually work? The first thing you're going to do is copy the data that you want to compare into a storage slot, and then also put the second piece of data you want into the same storage slot while using execute store with a scoreboard objective to test if it's possible to do that. The third command is kind of the counterintuitive part. If the second command fails, the scoreboard objective will be set to 0, and that actually means that the comparison was a success. If the command succeeds, that means the comparison was a failure. And then at the very end of it, I like to just clear out the storage slot that I was using. Why this works is that if they're the same, the second command will not be able to copy the data into the storage slot because Minecraft does not like to overwrite data with the same data. So if it's trying to write a piece of data into a storage slot that already has that exact same piece of data, it will fail, and that's how you know the two pieces of data are the same. I know it can be a little bit confusing, but just trust me on the fact that it works. Okay, so now I finally get to explain why the block identifier and the NBT comparing method work so well together. What I've done is I've set the NBT comparing to repeat constantly, and rather than comparing these two chests, what they're actually comparing is the first item in this chest with the first item in my inventory. Since I have no other items in my inventory, the first item is just whatever's in this slot right here, and I have turned the block identifier on. If I flip this lever, it's going to start telling me that the data doesn't match. And that's because the first block in here is a lapis block, and in my inventory there's a grass block. When I step onto this patch of grass and then walk over the lapis block, it'll start telling me that the data matches. What this does is effectively give you a way to detect if you're standing on the right block. And unlike with test for block, the block does not have to be hard-coded. So if I simply put a grass block in this chest instead, and then remove the lapis block from my inventory, it will say that the data matches when I'm standing on grass, but doesn't when I'm standing on lapis. I use tricks like this all the time, and what you're seeing right now with this demonstration is actually kind of a sneak peek for a future video. Now, the implications for the comparison actually go well beyond just this example. In one minigame I wrote, I actually used this to compare a player's UUID to the owner of a snowball to see if they matched. And then, using a recursive loop, I could iterate through snowballs and detect who that snowball belonged to so I could actually run actions with that person. I'm sure there's plenty of other uses for it that I haven't even thought of yet, so it's just a really versatile method. Oh, and here's one other thing I forgot to mention. You can actually replace this command with just about anything that you want. It doesn't have to be informational, it can be a full-on action if you like. Like I said, I'm sure there's plenty of things to do with this. It can be a summon command or a particle command or, you know, anything you can think of. Anyway, I think that's just about gonna do it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment below. I always appreciate that. And hopefully I will see you all around in a future video.